First, I want to thank Ron for that introduction, and I hope that I really saw it as an introduction of our union, not of me, but I hope that we can live up to that this week. We do have an amazing opportunity here. But I also want to thank Ron for the work he's done. As you all know, he was elected succeeding the retiring Vice President Pete Catucci. We'll hear more about Pete from Ron during the memorial service. But I know that District 2 believes that not only are we carrying on that spirit, but that we're ready in District 2 and across this union to fight harder than ever and to carry on in the best values that we have learned from each other and with the unity and love that we will need in these battles ahead. And Ron's work is tireless, as the District 2 staffers know, and as the District 2 delegates know. I want to also acknowledge my mentor, President Emeritus Morty Barr. And if she's not here now, she'll be here, Secretary Treasurer Emeritus Barbara Easterling. They are model in so many ways. When you talk to Morty, as you'll get a chance to this week, he'll tell you that he's working harder than ever. He heads up a senior housing organization called EDOC that fights to make sure that the oldest among us are not the homeless among us, and many other activities that he's involved with. And Barbara, as our retiree leaders know, has recently been elected the president of the Alliance for Retired Americans, our parent retiree organization. And these are both volunteer positions. I want to make that clear. At a time in life when they could both be enjoying family and friends, they recommit. I want to thank Annie and Jeff. I could never say enough about what it means to me to work with them. We work together. And as I'm going to be talking more about, every delegate here knows how tough these times are. And for me, working with them is everything. You'll hear a lot from them as well this week. But please recognize our Secretary Treasurer and Executive Vice President. And the Executive Board, stand up. Because we're, cramming in this room, usually they're right here next to me. I feel sort of better that way, but I guess I'll have to get used to this. We'll all get used to this, but the pluses way outnumber being like a family gathering here. But that Executive Board for Annie and Jeff and I is everything. We work really hard at our unity. The Executive Board, as you all know, gets elected from their region or their sector or division or at large. In the case of the Executive Board members at large. But what we work hardest at is our unity and being one and being together and taking up for each other's fights. More fights than we've ever had to take up for. And we understand what unity means. And I just want to thank them for their work and for their commitment to building this union. Regardless of where they come from, we all stand for the same things. And then I just want to acknowledge our own staff in my office, in our office in D.C., senior directors. I see 2 out of 3. Where's the third one? There they are. Yvette Herrera, Ed Sable, George Cole. Yvette's busy keeping track of this convention. We're all short-staffed. We've made a commitment to the field first. That's meant more work for us, but without more people. And they're there no matter what the job is, regardless of what their own job might be. And then Shalina Williams, who works right with me. I couldn't imagine this work without her. And the rest of the executive office, who I think are in the back and over here. And then our general counsel, Mary O'Melveny, who works for all of us. And also the senior staff that are working for Jeff and Annie, because we really work, I think, more than ever as one team. And so thanks, a shout out to Terry and Bill and Gail. And I hope I didn't miss anyone there. If I did, I love you very much, and I'm sorry. And then to the staff who are here with us and the hundreds who are not here. This staff work is definitely harder than it's ever been. The pressure in bargaining and all the other areas where our staff help build and lead this union has never been greater. And yet I have yet to hear a single staff person, even secondhand, I've yet to hear a single one say, I'm giving up or I'm giving out. So this is a shout out to all the staff in this room. Thank you. And mostly to all of you. You are the front lines. This is the toughest pressure in the history of this union. Management, cutting jobs, cutting pay, cutting benefits, and all too rarely saying to us, we're in the same boat. Let's work together to solve the problems. All too rarely saying to us, let's work together for government action on health care, as we'll be doing this week, or trade, or even more rarely, let's help workers across North America get a seat at the bargaining table. Let's help workers get more involved and tackle our problems together. Now, that may be a pipe dream to expect that. In some ways, that's why we're here. But that is what we're saying to the management of this country. We're not here to attack you, but we will attack many of the things you do. And we will fight until we change those things and until these cuts against working people stop and we start to dream and have a better day for working class people across this country. We will recognize here, as we always do, the organizing work, our work to build our COPE program, and many of the other things that are the programs and the life of our union. But the base of our union, the base of the triangle, remains representation and collective bargaining. So I want to first recognize at the beginning of this convention all the staff and delegates that are involved and have been involved in bargaining fights in the last year. I want everybody here who's been on a bargaining team of any kind to stand up. Stand up if you were bargaining at Verizon or at Quest or in New Jersey State Workers or local government or at United Airlines. Stand up. Stand up if you were involved in any bargaining at GE or at NBC or at GM. or at Delphi, or in the printing sector, in the newspaper guild, at the Boston Globe, at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Stand up if you're involved in bargaining in Canada or in Puerto Rico. Stand up. And to all those who are bargaining right now at home, at AT&T or United Airlines or at the Boston Globe, that was recognition of what it's like in 2009. And it was also recognition of the unity that is symbolized by us being here this week and making a statement more than we've ever made, that we are uniting our bargaining work and our political work and our organizing work like never before. And that message will go out across this country and across the nation's capital this week, that everybody will know that we are here and that we are strong and that we are united. Now, as Michael and Josh said, we are here in Washington at an amazing time, at a truly historic time. Thanks to your work, and we will be saying a lot more about it, the political work you did last summer and fall. We have an incredible new government led by President Barack Obama. And as you all know, this week his Vice President will be with us, and as well as the Secretary of Labor and several leaders from the Congress. And most importantly, you have made almost 200 appointments with members of Congress, who you will see this week on the issues of the day for working Americans. Almost 200 appointments, more than we have ever made, and more people here to see them. But as President Obama has said, his election was only a start. It was only a beginning. This is a time for change. And the U.S. labor movement, and CWA in particular, are here this week to help lead that change. He said it so many times. He can open the door, but we need to do that organizing. We're not here to sit back. We're not here to wait. We are full of hope, but we are full of energy. Now, CWA's commitment to member communication and involvement and the mobilization of our members places us in a unique position to impact the critical issues of the day like never before in our history. In a much earlier time, we were largely created and led by the amazing examples of other industrial workers. And now we stand shoulder to shoulder with them, as well as public sector workers, as leaders of the labor movement, as Josh said, at the local level, state level, in labor councils, and across this country. We have no choice but to lead, or we will wait and continue to watch our living standards fall and our jobs cut one unit at a time, one local at a time. We are not here to watch or wait. We are here to send that signal to every employer and to every member of Congress. We're here, we're fighting back, and we're here to fight back and change this country. Now, you see a photo there a few weeks ago. President Obama stood there in Normandy with veterans of D-Day, recalling the sacrifices of tens of thousands and remembering that day 65 years ago. And D-Day was a critical turning point in the fight for democracy and against fascism. I grew up in the 50s and 60s in North Philadelphia, in a house and neighborhood filled with stories of D-Day and Bataan and Tripoli and Anzio, stories of Liberation Day and concentration camps. My own father had spent 4 years in the Army. My uncle lived with us in the Navy. And another uncle, a colonel in the Marines, who worked for General Eisenhower on security for the planning of D-Day. But my neighborhood was also full of stories of fighting for democracy at home. Stories of the sit-down strike at Bud, a GM assembly plant, where the strike was crushed by police swinging clubs and cracking bones. But those workers didn't give up. And before D-Day, that plant was union, and nearly every other plant in that industrial neighborhood. Union members from those plants hit the beach knowing there was a better day a-coming, not only because they were helping to defeat Hitler, but because they had a union back home, and they could negotiate with General Motors and the other companies that shaped their economy and their lives. And they were confident because FDR and the Congress were on their side, adopting the minimum wage, Social Security, food stamps, and the National Labor Relations Act. So it wouldn't take cracked heads, sit-down strikes, or massive firings to have a seat at the bargaining table. They hit the beach at D-Day knowing they might not survive, but they were fighting for the strongest democracy in the world, leading the way in workplaces as well as the ballot box. Songwriter Woody Guthrie, best known for This Land Is Your Land and Union Made, was in the Merchant Marines, like our President Emeritus. And in 1944, he wrote a song called A Better World A-Comin'.
There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why. There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why. We will beat 'em on the land, on the sea, and in the sky. There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you see. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you see. When we'll all be union and we'll all be free, there's a better world that's a-comin', don't you see? There's a better world a-comin', don't you know, no. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you know? I'm a union man in a union war, it's a union world I'm fighting for. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you know? There's a better world that's a-comin'. There's a better world that's coming.
Okay, Woody, and if you couldn't see it, that guitar said, "This machine fights fascists." Better world a-comin'. That's what this week is about for us. 65 years later, we honor those who hit the beach at Normandy and all other veterans. But we also must honor those who sacrificed to build our movement at home. They fought for democracy and won. They fought for a better world to come in, and we need to honor them by rededicating ourselves here in all of CWA to building a labor movement that can again dream and act about moving forward. Offense, not just defense. We can't hold on to our standard of living just by playing defense. It's not worked for the last 25 years and won't work this year. At the bargaining table, we're forced to mostly play defense, not just because we have the worst economy in 75 years, but because the private sector is 7% organized in the U.S., down from 35% when it peaked in the years right after D-Day and before Taft-Hartley, and 60 years of court decisions that strengthened management control and weakened bargaining and organizing rights. Our Canadian sisters and brothers here are much better organized, but the same defensive trend continues at bargaining tables in Canada, as our members there, and for instance in public broadcasting, have to compete with private, unorganized internet, radio, and broadcasting companies. Even our flight attendants, among the best organized occupation in the U.S., face defensive battles as 7,000. Let's hear it for the flight attendants. Imagine this, 7,000 Northwest flight attendants now have their bargaining rights on the line after 60 years of collective bargaining. Their airline merged with the larger and anti-union Delta. Now the combined 20,000 flight attendants are together organizing the largest organizing campaign in the United States this year, with a National Mediation Board election likely this fall, led by Pat Friend and Vita Shook, and an incredible organizing committee at Northwest Airlines, at Delta Airlines, and CWAers across this country. Or even in the public sector, where the organizing coverage in the United States, the bargaining coverage is 35%. What's happened to the rest of this country has imploded back on public sector bargaining, whether it's in New Jersey or anywhere else. Defensive battles. Can we hold on to the health care? Can we hold on to the pay? Can we hold on to our jobs? And so we all know that we can't just play defense one contract at a time. We have to, this week, more than ever, put this union together, stronger than ever, and committed to offense, to be on the attack. We see the banners that you brought around the room, and there are hundreds more just like them. For 5 years, as Ron said, more years before there was a bill, but for 5 years, CWA has helped lead the battle for the Employee Free Choice Act. We have done, you have done, we have done an amazing job of building the million-member mobilization. Signing up in CWA alone, 120,000 out of the 1.5 million total commitments from all unions and allies in the million-member mobilization. 120,000 from CWA alone, twice what we set out to do 1 year ago. And as Ron mentioned, the three main components of this bill: majority sign-up, that when a majority sign up for a union, there is a union, and we want recognition that we are a union. And first contract arbitration, that we have enough stories of tens of thousands of workers in our union alone who went through the torture of an NLRB election and then never got a first contract. And third, meaningful penalties for the employer, the management lawbreakers. There are too many stories of your incredible work on this to tell them all. So I want to just highlight one: the work of District 13, mobilizing week after week after week after week to help move Arlen Specter. And even though Senator Specter was an original co-sponsor of the bill with Senator Kennedy, and he was a Republican then, and even though he voted for cloture to put the bill on the floor, as you know, we need 60 votes in 2007, on March the 24th, he took the podium in the Senate and announced that he was against the bill and was against cloture. And since March 24th, our locals in Pennsylvania have sent a message to our inspector: stand with us, or we'll stand against you when you run for election next year. And we worked with the steelworkers and other unions. And think about these numbers. In a matter of weeks, 3 weeks, collected 60,000 handwritten letters from work sites across Pennsylvania urging Senator Specter to support free choice. But on top of that, and you see one of the yard signs in his neighborhood, District 13 has led the way in community mobilization with yard signs, banners like we've seen across America and that are across this room, banners on overpasses, and our million-member mobilizers knocking on doors in Philadelphia and the suburbs and across Pennsylvania, saying to working families, which side is Senator Specter on? And will he fight for our jobs? And will he fight for our rights? Now, our work this week is not just about Senator Specter. Thanks to this work, he's now considering support for the bill. And he's now a Democrat. He changed parties in the last few weeks. And once Senator Franken is seated from Minnesota, who's here from Minnesota? There will be 60, and we expect that in the next 2 weeks. There will be 60 Democratic senators. And as you all know, we need 60 votes to put a bill on the floor, and then we need, at the minimum, 50 plus the vice president to pass a bill. But there are as many as 12 Democrats who on any given day haven't made their mind up under pressure from the Chamber of Commerce and the worst assault, the worst lobbying effort that the Chamber has run in decades, and they've done this before. And obviously, since there's 60 Democrats and the Republican Party has made this a unity measure, even the moderate Republicans in the Senate have said there will be party unity against the Employee Free Choice Act. And as our board members said on Friday when we discussed this, we need to use this with our Republican members. 28% of CWAers are Republican, and on local level, and even in the House of Representatives, there are Republicans that support workers' rights. But in the United States Senate, there's not one. And as I said, 12 Democrats, where this week we have meetings with all 12, in a couple cases, their staff and not them. We've got to make it clear to them that the whole world is watching. The whole world understands that we are behind the global standard. There's a lot of things that can be done about this economy. We can again raise the minimum wage, and that's probably a good thing. It's definitely a good thing. President cut taxes. That might be a good thing. There's a federal stimulus program and federal jobs. That's a good thing. But we cannot restore the middle class in this country with tax cuts and federal jobs or another stimulus, even though these may be good ideas. But if workers across this country again have real bargaining rights, it would translate into bargaining and buying power. Bargaining and buying power. We're going to send this week a message to Congress, loud and clear, that it's about time we stand up for union contracts and stop worrying about bankers' contracts. Let the bankers fend for themselves, and let us stand up for each other. Now, as I said, this is a global issue. This poster shows 70 flags of countries with majority sign-up. And we've had this distributed in the packets. It's been in the CWA News on the cover. And one democracy that doesn't have majority sign-up, our democracy. And our Canadian members would be quick to tell us that, yes, on the federal level in Canada there's majority sign-up, but some provinces have majority sign-up and some do not. And the struggle there goes on to improve bargaining rights there as well, but the maple leaf is up there because they do have it at the federal level. But the amazing thing on that poster is to look at all the flags from Central and South American countries, from South Africa and countries in Asia. The same elected officials that tell us we need to compete in the global economy tell us to compete stripped of the same rights that workers have in these 70 countries. Now, there's 4 pictures straight back from me. 4 folks, 4 of our heroes that we call the faces of the fight for the Employee Free Choice Act. These are our own brothers and sisters, our sons and daughters. And those posters, 50 feet by 50 feet, hang on buildings, including CWA, around Washington, D.C., and there's several others that are not CWAers. And on Wednesday, we will have a panel here, and workers will tell their own stories, the faces of the Employee Free Choice Act. And one of those faces, John Pizzana, Comcast Tech and a leader of Local 13,000, will be on this panel and tell his story then. But I want to briefly highlight this sister's story, Sarah Steffens, an award-winning journalist at the Contra Costa Times, where she and her co-workers formed an organizing committee and began working with other journalists in California's East Bay at media newspapers. Despite a total and typical all-out anti-union campaign, with the predictions by the management of closings and layoffs, and under our law now, predictions are legal. You can't threaten, but you can predict. You can't threaten, but you can predict. So in that campaign, in the East Bay, or at Comcast campaigns, or at Verizon Wireless campaigns, or at Delta Airlines, it's not illegal. It's not considered interference for the employer to predict that there'll be layoffs if you vote for the union. It's not illegal for employers to predict that they'll shut down the Verizon Wireless call center, like happened to 3 others when they organized. It's not illegal for Comcast to predict that they'll contract out work when you vote for the union or that you'll lose your benefits. And in this case, despite that campaign, these workers, led by Sarah, stayed united. And right before our convention last year, they won that representation election, and she joined us at our convention. But the attacks never stopped. And soon after the election victory, Sarah was laid off, along with more than 20 others. But she never stopped organizing. She was elected chair of the bargaining table, the bargaining committee, and she worked at it for 10 months. She also became, obviously, a leading spokesperson for the Employee Free Choice Act. And her 50 by 50 foot poster hangs on the AFL-CIO building on 16th Street. 2 weeks ago, Sarah and her bargaining committee, amazingly, with incredible support from the Guild in District 9, from elected officials like George Miller, that's his hometown paper, the chair of the House Labor Committee, reached a tentative agreement with this employer. Sarah was now close to the delivery date for her second child. She had a 2-year-old daughter as well. I called her that day to congratulate her, and she was elated, ecstatic. And I said, Sarah, what about your job? And she said, we couldn't get any of the jobs back. And I said, what about arbitration? We couldn't get arbitration on any of those layoffs or firings, as I would call them. And she said, Larry, the important thing is the union will go on. And then that contract was ratified overwhelmingly. And last week, Sarah gave birth to her second daughter, June. This is a victory story, yes, but at what cost? Is this what it should take to get a seat at the table? Is this what it should take to get a union contract? And meanwhile, Media News, the second largest chain in the country, continues to campaign aggressively against the Employee Free Choice Act, touting the sanctity of secret ballots and the horror of first contract arbitration. So why is it so hard to get the Democratic caucus to unify? And we'll hear from Senator Harkin, who's the acting chair of the committee. Terrific senator. He'll be here with us on Wednesday, and he leads this effort in the Senate. The short answer is the Chamber of Commerce and their front groups and $200 million that they've already spent on this. But go back to that history that we started with here. D-Day, the labor movement that had its birth at that same time. In 1934, when the National Labor Relations Act was being debated, the Chamber of Commerce argued, quote, the freedom of employers as well as employees to enter into and determine the conditions of employment relations with each other would be virtually destroyed. We passed the bill anyway. Decades later, in the 60s, when occupational safety and health was being debated in Congress, the Chamber of Commerce said, quote, the Occupational Safety and Health Act would open the door to extreme harassment of business. Employers would be treated worse than criminals, and there would be penalties on the innocent. Or later, when the Chamber weighed in on the dangers of ending pregnancy discrimination, we have a resolution related to this. The Chamber said, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act is unwarranted government interference in the collective bargaining process. And this year, the Chamber warns that civilization itself is at stake with the debate on the Employee Free Choice Act. So, as summer now begins, it's up to us. And what we do this week will make all the difference. As Senator Harkin will tell us, the effort is in full force to get all 60 Democrats to at least vote for cloture, procedural unity on a key party issue on this bill. And then the ones who are against it can vote no. It will pass anyway. But we don't have that unity yet. And so our meetings this week are absolutely critical. Now, we could go on and on here with the list of these bargaining fights, and I wanted to honor all of those, not only who are at the bargaining tables, but involved in the mobilization. And also all those who in the last year, despite these incredibly tough times, bargained amazing contracts, like at Verizon East, where in addition to holding on to our standard of living, we were able to negotiate bargaining rights for the first time for more than 600 workers at Verizon Business, and the incredible unity there of Districts 1, 2, and 13. And then at Quest, later in the year, with the economy much worse and a company under a financial cloud, to say the least, our team in District 7 stayed with it for months. Or in New Jersey, where our 40,000 state workers and 20,000 more in local government have been bargaining almost continuously, faced with budget cuts, like public workers are across the country, saving, in this case of New Jersey, saving our jobs and preserving our future and our bargaining rights. But the key to all these, and there's hundreds of more, fights for first contracts and fights to hold on to contracts that are decades old in every industry, as I mentioned earlier. But the key to all of this is our unity. And our unity gets tested in every local, in every bargaining unit, across this hall. Our unity gets tested in tough times. In better times, we're cheering ourselves forward and celebrating victories. But in tough times, all too often, solidarity can turn to anger. And we forget about our external opposition and turn inward on each other. So among everything else, this week and in the months ahead, as we build our movement, we need to work at, not just hope for, our own unity. It may be half the work each person in this room does, is to talk to those who are angry. It's okay to disagree, but we don't need anger among us. And to remind ourselves that we have to find ways to grow stronger and to build on the unity and to bring that unity and that spirit to our communities and to build a movement not only among organized workers in Puerto Rico and Canada and the United States, but among unorganized workers in these toughest of times. Now, right now, we have the largest negotiations in the country this year going on at AT&T. More than 90,000 active workers, active members of our union, and 10,000 at the IBW. And tens of thousands of retirees whose health care is on the line there as well. And many of those leaders and activists are not with us, and some are with us. And we have sent a message loud and clear to AT&T management that we will be in the bargaining table, and we'll be unified in our workplaces, and we'll be reaching out to our communities to talk about issues like health care for all instead of health care cuts for as long as it takes. For as long as it takes, that we will and that we know we're in a recession, but we also know this is a profitable company. And if companies in this country continue to cut jobs and cut benefits and cut pay, this recession will go on and on and on. That was the lesson in the Great Depression. We learned that lesson, and we will not forget that lesson. And whether it's the largest bargaining unit at AT&T or the smallest unit that might be in the public sector someplace or in a print shop, we have that same message. And interestingly enough, John Maynard Keynes, who was the best-known economist during the Great Depression, wrote a letter on February 1st, 1938 to President Roosevelt. And he said, financial regulation is important. They had created the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. Jobs programs are important. They had the Works Progress Administration putting hundreds of thousands to work. But he said, quote, I regard the expansion of collective bargaining as essential. This was not a labor leader. He wasn't even in the Labour Party in the UK. The expansion of collective bargaining is essential. Because with bargaining rights, we can stop the pay cuts. And when you stop the pay cuts, people can buy the goods you produce. And with a stronger labor movement, we can build the political movement that we have begun to build around those same four issues that we've talked about at this convention for 4 years. Health care for all, and we're going to talk a lot more about that on Thursday. And on Thursday, nearly 1,000 CWA Stewards Army activists will be joining us, coming from this, actually some of them from 8 and 10 hours away by bus and by car, to join us on Thursday as 10,000 will rally at Upper Senate Park for real health care reform, not some paper-thin version, but real health care reform that will have a mandate in it that all employers must provide health care for their employees, all employers. And that we will fight to make sure that health care benefits that we have to fight for so hard are not taxed. Taxing health care benefits is a bad idea. It's a sick idea, and we will be fighting that as well. And we've been fighting for 4 years, working for 4 years on jobs and trade, jobs across North America, and a trade policy that recognizes fair trade, not free trade, where not only do we have no rights, but ultimately we end up with no jobs as it's a race to the bottom. And I mentioned one particular fight that really links together health care and trade. The fight of 27,000 IUE CWA retirees who in bankruptcy court last week are now threatened with the removal of all their health benefits as retirees, regardless of age. At the same time that our government talks about health care reform, the government has yet to step up and say that as we invest in the new General Motors, we maintain the pledges we've made to those who built General Motors. Some of those GM retirees are here with us in the hall. Would you stand up? As we commit this week to fight for the Employee Free Choice Act and health care and American jobs and Canadian jobs, North American jobs, we also commit, and it'll be in our packets, to ask every member of Congress to send a letter to the Treasury Department that says no more stripping of benefits that workers worked and bargained for decades to achieve. That all of us, not just GM retirees, will stand up and fight for those benefits. And so we think back and we cherish the sacrifices and commitments of those who hit the beach at Normandy, of those who built our movement, our labor movement, our civil rights movement in the decades since then, and of all of those in this room and the Stewards Army at home. We're here with the toughest negotiations in recent years and the toughest economy. But we're more determined than ever to build our unity and our union. These are days of incredible political possibilities. We are building a political movement for working families, and when necessary, we will fight and fight against corporate greed. But most of all, we come here knowing that the work we will do here this week is critical. We are leading a campaign to revitalize the economy. That we must all be a spark of hope, even in this time of despair for so many. We don't have to hit the beach like those veterans of D-Day 65 years ago. But we do need to believe that there's a better world coming. We need to believe it. We need to commit to it. We need to work for it. And we need to fight for it day and night for it. This is the time, and this is our time. CWA. Thank you.